So we're about to have a discussion about the iris. This is a study of Rayid, and Rayid is a study of the human soul and how it's reflected through the iris. This is a symbol I like to use for the iris, and I use about this many locations within the iris. I use sectors more than positions. Each one of these points also corresponds to a different part of the family tree. And each one of these points and the family tree also corresponds to glands, organs, and body systems of the human body. So there's a lot here. It takes a lifetime of examining the iris, the family tree, the birth order, and all of the potential remedies, be they supplements or nutrition or vibrational or meditational, spirit, mind, body instruments. But part of this process is if you're interested in the iris, then there's something inside of you that is seeking. You're a seeker of something. You're wanting to explore something very personal, something very human, very intimate, and in some cases very emotional. You're looking for something. And those people that may come to you as a practitioner, they want the same thing. They're looking for something, and sometimes they're not even sure what they're looking for, but they're coming to someone to offer them a modality of self-discovery. That's really what it's about. A continuous experience of self-discovery. You won't be done. There is no conclusion to the amount of information that you can learn about yourself or someone else or about the cosmos when using the iris. It's about every symbol in nature. Yes, it goes all the way out to the Big Bang and back again. The iris is extraordinary. I've been at it for over 40 years, and I wouldn't even say that I've managed 3% of the knowledge that's available in the iris. So leave yourself lots of time and opportunity to be able to discover what might be found here. But the first thing I would suggest you examine is examine your motive for why you want to do it. Why do you want to examine somebody else's iris? What's there for you? Is it curiosity, personal gain, service? What's the actual reason to get so close to another human being? There's no other therapy or human contact exactly like it. For you to go up to someone's eyes with a lens and you look in their eye or you look at their picture, you're looking very intimately inside that person. And there is an opportunity and there is a personal responsibility for engaging in the act. Because when you do that, you're actually taking something on and putting yourself in a position to be able to offer them some guidance, some education, some opportunity to discover a truth or change. That's really what you're doing. You're engaged in something significant. And the person that's being altered in this process, yes, it's you. Every time you go into another iris or another family tree or another social situation or a family, you're actually being altered yourself. So an attitude of humility, respect, compassion, the love of truth, this is all really about the iris. It's not about going in there and finding something wrong. There's literally nothing wrong in any iris. Everything you see in any iris is a perfect reflection of the forces of nature and cause-effect reality feeding back constitutional structure in the iris. I'm saying that each and every position that you might examine doesn't mean something is wrong. It means there is an opportunity to discover something new. And when that discovery becomes truly emotional, then there is a transformation within the person. So you're there to engage in a transformational experience. And so part of this process is really about establishing rapport with that person. You're already establishing rapport if you're putting yourself out as one capable of looking in their irises and explaining anything, even if it's about their physical health or ultimately about their family or their personality or their spiritual evolution. You're holding yourself out as one interested in and capable of explaining that. That's a big task. Good luck with that. I suggest that you consider not only your motive, but you ask for, by whatever perspective that you want, divine help. It might be help from a guardian angel if you have one, or from a guru or a priest or rabbi or whoever it is, that there is a spiritual orientation to what you're doing in this process of human service. The rapport. The rapport is a significant part of it. It's the thing that I look to do first. My special way of doing consultation now, which is very different than 40 years ago or 10 years ago, now what I like to do is ask the person to just sit still. There's no need to respond to me unless I ask you a question for at least 20 minutes. There are some questions I'll ask. And so one of the first things I do is I like to ask them, which of your children are you? Which child of your father, which child of your father are you? I like to draw their birth order significance. So I like to have on the diagram, on a whiteboard around me, I like to have already a diagram of their family tree, and then I add in their birth order, if they're number one of their father, number two, and I put down the genders, and I use a circle for a woman and a triangle for a man. And so there's a sequence of, I like to show them their family tree. And I like to explain to them how number one son has a particular orientation in the family genetics. And number one daughter has a different orientation. And then I like to describe the birth order patterns, not only of each of their siblings that aren't in the room, obviously, and their children if they have them. It's quite personal if somebody talks about your children and the birth order of your children, and they're not in the room, and the birth order of your siblings, or the birth order of your mate or partner. I like to use the family tree diagram. Why? It is not realistic to do a really good consultation on an iris without doing the birth order. Yes, you can do some kind of consultation just using the iris, and you look at the left and the right, and eventually you're going to discover that the left eye primarily corresponds to the mother's side of the family, and the right eye corresponds to the father's side of the family. So you're going to end up with, sooner or later, a diagram of mother's side and father's side of the family. So if you want to really do the iris, by the way, there are an infinity of choices about how you interpret an iris. There's lots of iris constitutional patterns. We'll go over them. But I can't do an iris consultation without engaging the family tree dynamics because it modifies everything. What do I mean by that? You might have a particular constitution and you're a number one son. If you have the same constitution and you're a number two son, it's a different interpretation of the constitution. You might be the fourth son and the same constitution. It's a different kind of interpretation, and it's a different therapeutic sequence later on, and you want to be as accurate as possible when identifying a constitution. Now, eventually you'll find out that the constitution doesn't change very much. It does change, but it doesn't change. If you look at very small children, some children, you can't see anything at all in their iris for 2 to 3 months. Some children, all the patterns are there at birth. And sometimes you can't see any brown dots, whatever you want to call them as. You can't see them at all until 2 or 3 years later. And then by the age of 7, 8, or 9, here they come. How did they come later? Did the iris change, or was that already part of the genetic program that the person came in with? How do you understand this information? And then how do you look at the understanding of the topography of the body? If somebody walks in, one of the very first things I noticed is the overall phenotype, the body type. How big is the body? How big is the head, the neck, the shoulders, the waist, the legs? How do they carry themselves? You can start doing a consultation right when somebody comes through the door. You look at their skin, you look at the shape of the face, the angles of the face, how far apart are the eyes. You compare that to the shoulders and the waist and the hips and the legs and the height. You notice many things right away. And if you know the body type correspondence in the birth order, it's going to help you a lot. For example, we'll give you a body type correspondence for all the different birth order positions. We already have that. That's available to you. I'm not going to try to teach you all the body types in this simple class. I'm not going to teach you all the birth order positions and how to combine them with genetic number, gender number, social number. I'm not going to try to take you through all the constitutions of the iris. I'm trying to give you an overview of what's possible. And if you're really interested, you can come and learn different parts more enthusiastically. But know body types. You have to learn body types. And you're doing it all the time. You're walking down the street, you're looking at a body type. We notice the shape of someone's face, shoulders, head, legs. And you can sit in a mall somewhere. I used to like to do this. Sit in a mall and watch families go by, look at the body types of the 3 children and the mother and the father or the grandparents that they're with them. And you'll do consultations where a mother will bring in her 3 kids and grandma will come along. And pretty soon you'll start to see how things all blend together. It'd be really nice if you already knew that going into a consultation. So if you see a body type sit down in front of you and you know it's a body type of a number 1 girl, and every number 1 girl has a typical body type, a number 2 girl has a different body type, and there are many, many exceptions, and it's useful to know. So here you are, you're establishing an attentive way of looking at a person coming in, and then you start to watch. They sit down, and one of the things you look at is you can look at the eyes to see which one of the eyes is most open. Now, typically everybody has one eye more open than the other. And then one of the first things I do is, here, let me take a look at something. I ask them to give me their thumbs side by side. I do this every time. I give you lots of reasons about why, but I like to look at the half moons at the base of the thumbnail. And every one of us has these half moons at the base of the thumbnail. And later on, you'll find that the one that is most peaked, most narrow, even in the thumbnail itself, the one that's most pointed, usually has a tendency to be the dominant side. And later on, you'll find out that dominant side is related to dominant to the father's side, dominant to the mother's side. So now you can interpret the constitution based on the eyes and the thumbs differently based on the polarity of their body. And then you'll find out that generally speaking, the polarity types are different. Generally speaking, the thinner, narrower people usually are connected to their mother's family. And that usually people who are stronger in the shoulder and more mesomorphic in the body, bigger overall, typically taller overall, but not always, those bigger people are from the father's side of the family. And so you can right away start to see from their body type, from the look of their face, and then right there with the thumbs, you were also looking at the length of the fingers and the correspondence of the hands. You're looking at the skin. There's a whole lesson in looking at just the skin of the hands. And with the skin of the hands, you can tell their diet right away. And you might notice that they have a arthritic condition in the knuckle of the second or third finger on their left hand or their right hand. And you already know an assessment of their family tree just before they ever said a word. Then you ask them about their birth order position, and you have now an overall map. Now, what I like to do is I like to ask them not to say too much. Don't tell me. I don't want to interpret what they're saying to me. I want to objectively tell them about what their iris says, their right eye and the left eye, and what their orientation and their birth order pattern and their body type would imply. Because every constitutional pattern has a progressive sequence of what it goes through in life, meaning this iris will be very different at age 5 than 15. The iris will change a little bit between 5 and 15, but after 15, no, it's not going to change much at all. So how does the same iris, how do you interpret that iris at age 30 or age 40 or age 50? How do you change your interpretation of the iris if it's the identical iris? And then you'll find out that there are cycles and seasons of things. There's generally a map from 0 to 16, 16 to 32, 32 to 64, and there's a 64-year cycle of how you interpret a single iris. So yes, it's useful to know how that iris has a personality pattern. And you're going to find that all the iris patterns have typical ways that they communicate, of how they hold the body, the gestures they use, or they use none, or they look up, or they look down, or they look away. So you'll notice the cadence of their words or the tone of their voice. You'll notice that some people, they'll shake their head up and down no matter what you say. They'll just keep the head moving up and down. Other people, they'll sit there and look at you, hello, and you'll be able to see these differences. And by the differences in even how the head moves, you'll already have an understanding about which connection they have to which side of the family and how they got there. So there's a lot of information here, and it's available for you to use. I like to take all this information in the first 20 minutes, and then now comes the hard part. I need to explain or educate them about how they become more self-aware of their own natural attributes. I have a tendency to want to find the 3 yes answers. It looks like you have an analytical thinking mind. You're pretty bright. Looks like you like to understand and you like to read, or you're looking for truth about something, and you have a tendency to talk more than your mate. Yes, I do. And then they'll start to explain it to you. So you'll be able to see right away whether somebody communicates with words or somebody communicates with silence. And you'll be able to see the constitutional type. There's a lot of information that's available. So once this is established, I usually follow some pretty strict rules. One is, my first responsibility is to keep them alive. That sounds obvious, right? So if I'm not really sure about some physical condition they're going through, I want to be sure that they're getting all the help that they can get from the appropriate professionals who are good about that subject. Meaning I want to be sure that their physical body is at its optimum ability to survive. I mean, it sounds obvious, but somebody comes in bleeding, you stop the bleeding first. You can give them a lecture later about how to handle a knife better. So I have a tendency to want to be sure that the physical body is as stable as possible. That means, have you gone to a good naturopath? Is your diet regulated? Are you having profound difficulties in elimination, or are you having difficulties in digestion? I usually want to be sure that their physical body is stabilized enough and they're self-responsible about their own diet enough that we can move into the more emotional interpretations about who and what they are. Now, basically what I've done is given you the very first step of how I go through a consultation. I go through the evaluation, the iris, the birth order. I combine that with the body type, and then I ask them, do you have any present symptoms in your body that you want to discuss? Now the communication starts to arrive. Now, I have to be as clear with you as possible. Most people are numb to the pain that's really hurting them, where oftentimes they have a pain in their hand because they have arthritis. They're not feeling its relationship to the liver and how the liver is inflamed. They can feel their hand, but they can't feel their liver. So most people have a pain, which is a reflection of some other unresolved emotional pattern that's affecting a different organ. So I want to give you a map that shows you the correspondence of all of the glands, organs, and body systems and the corresponding emotional patterns associated with them. That map is available, and I'll make it available to you for free. You can have that map. It'll take you a lifetime to understand how to apply it. I'm still learning how to apply it, but this is how I get started with a consultation. But what I end up with is the most important part, because what you've done by doing all this, and you do it really well, is that you've established a trust or a rapport between yourself and that person. Now, in the last 15 to 20 minutes of an hour, or the last third, if you will, of the consultation, if it's longer than that, I want to give them the starting blocks of what I would consider to be the most important things to do. What is going to be the follow through or the action that they leave with? They need something to be actionable with, something to do. Now, I'm leaning toward myself a very personal way of something to do for every person that leaves. What do you ask them to do? That's what I'm going to present when we get to the final part of this presentation, is I'm going to show you the therapeutic model that I use for myself and I suggest for other people. Now, this has been another overview of the iris, the family tree, the understanding, the rapport, and leading into the body chemistry and so on. Next, yes, my favorite subject, the iris. Coming to you soon.